Welcome everyone to lecture number 26. Okay, so now we are proceeding to start with the fundamental rights. Moving to ahead, we'll try to understand what exactly this rights, what do we understand by that. Okay, so this fundamental rights comes under the part 3 of the constitution. It comes under the part 3 of the constitution. Okay, so part 3, part 4 and part 4a concretizes the lofty goals of all objectives that is mentioned in our preamble. Okay, so what are the objective goals that is mentioned under the preamble? Sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic states. Okay, these are the uh, this is the objective of the preamble, and that we ensure through the part 3, part 4 and part 4a of the constitution. Okay, so part 3, part 4 and part 4a, what are the things that is present under those section part we'll discuss in details. Okay, so it concretizes the lofty goals of all the objectives mentioned in our preamble. Okay, and we have discussed in detail the preamble part. Okay, there are 3 parts total in the preamble that we have discussed. Okay, please go through that. So part 4, what exactly this part 4? I'm just giving you introduction. Part 4 is nothing but our DPSP, that is directive principle of state policies. So it is like it denotes those things that a state should do whatever the goals or policies they are going to make, should keep in mind this part 4. It should be on the line of part 4. Okay, and whether these are enforceable or not, we'll discuss it. Okay, fundamental duties. Okay, fundamental duties, what are the duties of the citizens towards the states? Those we will be discussing it here. This is also not enforceable. Okay, these are the duties that you have to, as a citizen, we have to perform. Okay, now so we'll discuss exactly in the part 3. Currently we are discussing part 3, that is our fundamental rights. Okay, so what this part 3 tells us? Part 3 is negative obligation. What exactly means, we'll tell you, we'll explain it. Part 3 is negative obligations of the state not to interfere with the what, with the liberty of an individual. So it tells that a state shall not, it tells about the negative, in negative that the state cannot do with that individual, that you cannot snatch their rights, you cannot snatch right to equality, you cannot snatch right to freedom, you cannot snatch right to expression, right to live. Okay, so those things it tells about the negative obligation. Okay, it tells the negative obligations. Okay, and we'll see that DPSP, directive principle of a state policy, it deals with the positive obligations. Okay, it deals with the positive obligations. So negative obligations, it deals with the fundamental right. Okay, in fundamental right it tells us that this should not be done with the individual, it should not be done. So it related to negative obligations. Now positive obligations, so you will understand more in detail when we start reading all those things, fundamental rights, fundamental duties, DPSP. So what exactly does it mean? What does it mean obligations, negative obligations, positive obligations? Like whatever the fundamental rights do we have, it tells that the state cannot do so. That's why it is it tells that that fundamental right is related to the negative obligation. That right to liberty is there, right against exploitation is there, right to freedom of religion is there, cultural and educational rights are there, right to constitutional remedies are there. Okay, so it is negative obligation that the state cannot do. Now positive obligations, positive obligations, okay, is of the state, of the state to take steps for the welfare of the individual. Now what does this positive obligations means? Positive obligations, this fundamental duties, DPSP, it deals with the positive obligation. What are the points that is mentioned, what are the articles that is mentioned under DPSP? So it tells that a state should secure a social order for the promotion of welfare of the people, certain principle of policy to be followed by the state, that is mentioned, equal justice and free legal aid should be provided, organization of village panchayat should be there, right to work, to education. So all those things are mentioned under the DPSP that state should do. Okay, so that's why it is positive obligation, that it is telling that a state should do. Oh, okay, it is not telling a negative that a state should not do. A state should do. Okay, a state should do, make the policies with certain provisions, with take care of the people mindset of the lower section people also. Okay, we have to make policies with respect to the lining, like the giving education to the girls also. Okay, so they relate to the positive obligations. Okay, it is not telling that a state should not do, it is telling that a state should do. In the fundamental right, it is telling that a state should not do, a state can't snatch any someone's right to freedom, right to speech, a state cannot do so. That's why we tell fundamental right as a negative obligation, and positive and DPSPs as the positive obligations. Okay, and DPSPs as the positive obligations. Now the duties, now the duties of an individual, to society and fellow individuals. Okay, it tells about the fundamental duties. Okay, so negative obligations denotes the fundamental rights, positive obligations come under the DPSPs, and duties related aspects come under the fundamental duties. Okay, I guess like it is very clear, it is very clear, I guess. I don't think there is any doubt. If there is any doubt, please connect with me on my social media handle. Okay, so fundamental rights, so what exactly this fundamental rights, why we are shouting too much on this thing? Within the news also sometimes it comes. So what exactly is that? Fundamental rights, fundamental rights are basic rights, are basic rights without which an individual cannot grow, without which an individual cannot grow. Okay, fundamental rights are basic rights without which an individual cannot grow. Okay, the fundamental rights are a certificate of democracy. Fundamental rights, fundamental rights are a certificate of democracy. Certificate of democracy. Okay, why we are calling so much certificate, we'll see in coming of this lecture, moving forward for this lecture. Okay, fundamental rights are meant, these fundamental rights are meant for promoting the ideal, promoting the ideal of political democracy. Fundamental this right is meant for promoting the ideal of political democracy. They prevent this fundamental right, this fundamental, they means the fundamental right prevent the establishment of an authoritarian and despotic rule. Authoritarian and despotic rule. Okay, this fundamental right are meant for the, it is meant for the political democracy, and it prevent, like if there is anyone who is ruling as a despotic ruler, authoritarian, like I am the king, then public have a right. If he is not ruling well, public can throw him out. Okay, that's what, that's give a right to the that power is given to the people. Okay, we see that people is leading the country as a powerful man, but no, whose power is it? This power is of public, who has who voted for that person, for that people, for that party. Because of the power of the people, that person is ruling over there. If people want in election, they will throw him out. Okay, and there are many ways in within the ruling period also. If that person is not doing so well, there are other constitutional right through which floor test and all will happen, and this government will fall down. Okay, so yeah, so in that way, that's how fundamental rights are very important. Okay, okay, so another important points, the fundamental right operate as a limitations on the tyranny of the executive and arbitrary laws of the legislature. So let us suppose there are certain implementation that are being done by the ruling government where where the fundamental rights of the people are getting violated. Like let us suppose you are doing any poetry kind of things which is which against some any political party, then as per the IT law that has been done in the 2000, so due to the on that law, the person used to be kept under jail. There was a provision of jail also. So this was against the freedom of speech and expression. Okay, even a right to leave. So that law was being removed by the Supreme Court, that we have already discussed previously. Okay, so that's what the fundamental right. So how the Supreme Court operates, like how the Supreme Court decide, okay, no, this rule should be whatever the law has been made should not be there, should be removed. So how Supreme Court compare those things with the fundamental rights only. If it is violating the fundamental rights of any individual, the law will be proved to be invalid. Okay, so the fundamental rights operate operate as limitations of what limitations on the tyranny, limitations on the tyranny of the executives and arbitrary laws of the legislature. By legislature, if the law is passed and this law is violating the fundamental right of any people, then the fundamental right will come into the play and Supreme Court will violate that, will make that law null and void. Okay, so and arbitrary laws of the legislature. Okay, let me check whether audio is fine. Yeah, okay, yeah, that is one aspect. Now another aspect will be, in short, they aim at establishing a government of laws, not of men. This fundamental right, in short, tells, in short, they aim at, this fundamental right, at establishing a government of laws, not of men. Government will be abided by the laws. It not this a personal interest of the men who is ruling on the people. It is the laws that is making the people who has been chosen by the public to rule. Okay, and they have the complete right to remove that person from the position if it is not abided by the laws. Okay, now, so rights. So what exactly do we mean? We have discussed many things, that what is fundamental rights, what are its importance. Okay, what is the importance of the fundamental rights, that we have discussed. Okay, but what do we understand by rights? Okay, how many types of rights are there? Okay, how many types of rights are there? Okay, first, rights are of two types. Rights are of two types. One will be your constitutional rights and another will be your statutory rights. Okay, yeah. Now within these there are two types of rights. This one is constitutional rights, one is statutory rights. Okay, now we'll try to understand what does this mean. Within this constitutional right, we have, one is fundamental right and other will be other constitutional right that is given to us, other constitutional rights. Okay, other constitutional rights. Yeah, now fundamental right that we are going to discuss. Okay, right to equality, right to equality, then you will be have a right to possess any religion, like this, all those things we are going to discuss. Okay, now we'll this other constitutional right, it contains, it includes like right to property. We have a right to property, right to interstate business. Those rights will come under the constitutional rights. What is the example of this constitutional right? The right has been, that is given by the constitution, but that is not included within the fundamental rights. Those rights will be considered under the other constitutional right. those are the also right. Fundamental right is also a constitutional right, but that is not a fundamental right. Okay, right to property. We have a right to property that comes from the article 300A. Okay, now we have one more right, right to interstate business. Right to interstate business, that will come under the article 301. Okay, so there are many such rights. So those rights will be considered under the other constitutional rights, and we have fundamental rights. Now separately we have a statutory rights. What is the statutory rights? Such rights like right to transfer property, right to transfer of property, that will be your statutory rights. Right to marry, right to marry, right to divorce. Okay, Manrega, all those things will come under the statutory rights. Okay, so we have two types of rights, one is constitutional rights, one is statutory rights. In the constitution right we have a fundamental rights, other constitutional rights, and within the other constitution such as like right to property, those rights are mentioned under the constitution. Okay, but these rights will not be considered as the fundamental rights, because they are not contained under the part 3 of the constitution. Okay, other constitution they have a separate article for that, and they have a separate right that comes under the constitution itself, but not under the part 3. And we have something called statutory rights like right to transfer property, right to marry, divorce, Manrega and all that used to be created by the government in time to time. Okay, so these are the types of rights that we have. So yeah, I paused this video because I had one urgent call from my office. Okay, so yeah, sorry for this interruption. Okay, so these statutory rights is the laws that have been made formally by the government, constitutional right, fundamental rights, and other constitutional rights. Okay, so now proceeding ahead, right, what exactly do we understand by right? What do we understand by rights? Right is something a legal claim to equality. Right is something that it claims to be equality among the people. It means equality becomes my right. Okay, it doesn't mean that you have a separate right that is given to poor section people and separate right is given to the upper section people. Poor section people, people who are under the poverty, and upper section, let us suppose, people who are rich. Okay, so it is not something that there is a separate right that is given to them, separate right is given to the poor people. No, both people will have all the same rights. Okay, those rights mentioned as text in a constitution are called constitutional rights. Are called constitutional rights. And those rights that are not mentioned in the constitution, that are not mentioned in constitution are called extra constitutional rights. Extra constitutional rights, or those rights passed by an act, of parliament or by laws made by whom? Legislatures. Who makes the laws? Legislatures. And who execute the laws? Executive. Okay, so laws are made by the legislature or by parliament are called statutory rights. Understand? I guess now you have a very clear picture what exactly is constitutional rights and what exactly is statutory rights. Okay, and within the constitutional rights we have two aspects. One is called fundamental rights and other is called other constitutional rights. Okay, so if we talk about the statutory rights, so right to information is given to the right to information of act. Okay, right, if we have something called a right to information, so that comes it is given to us from right to information, RTI, right to information act. Okay, it is not mentioned in the constitution, but it is an act that is passed by the legislatures. Okay, these rights will come under the statutory rights. Right to transfer property, Mahatma Gandhi Manrega scheme, so right to employment of 100 days that is given to the people. Okay, right to marry, right to divorce. So all those rights, these are not mentioned under the constitution by the constitutional framework. These have come over a period of time as per the requirement, and the parliament has implemented it. So those such rights which are not mentioned under the constitution will be called as the statutory rights, and those rights which are mentioned under the constitution will be called as the constitutional right. And within the constitution we have a fundamental rights and we have a other constitutional right. Fundamental rights are those rights which are mentioned under the part 3, and constitutional right, they are mentioned under the constitution, but it is not mentioned in the part 3 of the constitution. That's why that's why it is called as the other constitutional right. Okay, if my fundamental rights are violated, I can directly approach to the Supreme Court. If this fundamental right is getting violated, I can directly approach to the Supreme Court. Okay, but in other constitutional right, I have to go through district court, then district court to high court. If it is required, then it will go to Supreme Court. So I can that is the main difference between that fundamental right and other constitutional right. In the other constitutional right, we can't directly approach to the Supreme Court if it is violated. Okay, there is a provision, I have to go with the district court, high court, Supreme. Like I lost my case, then I can move to the high court. If again lost, then I can move to the Supreme Court. Then Supreme Court is supreme. What are the decisions Supreme Court will take, then that must have to be followed. Okay, so these rights are mentioned in the other constitutional right. These are nobody can directly approach to the Supreme Court for any violation happening under this right. But if your fundamental right is violated, so in that case you can directly approach to the Supreme Court. That is very important to remember. That is the main difference. Okay, so all the fundamental rights are legal rights. Okay, all the fundamental rights that are given are the legal rights. Now, and this is the statutory right. So we can approach, we can't approach to the Supreme Court also directly through the statutory law. So there is a provision that we have to follow the court step by step, that I have discussed it in other constitutional right. Okay, so that's about all this in lecture. Then we'll discuss more about the global picture of fundamental rights and all. Okay, thank you.